The cafeteria at Zenith Academy was like nothing Earth had ever seen. Floating platforms served as tables, accommodating species of every shape and size imaginable. Massive windows overlooked 3 different moons hanging in an amber sky. The air hummed with translator devices working overtime, turning thousands of alien languages into something everyone could understand. It should have been amazing. It should have felt like a dream. For Lyra, it was a nightmare that repeated itself every single day. She sat in the furthest corner of the hall, hood pulled low over her face, shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear into herself. Her lunch tray sat untouched in front of her. The violet skin of her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. She knew what was coming. It always came. "Hey everyone, don't look directly at it," a voice rang out from across the room. "You might turn to stone." The laughter started immediately. Sharp, cruel, spreading like wildfire through the cafeteria. Lyra didn't need to look up to know who was speaking. Vex and his Krillian friends had made tormenting her their daily entertainment. The Krillians were crystalline beings, their bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. They were beautiful by every galactic standard and they knew it. "I heard her own family paid the school extra just to take her," another Krillian voice added, making sure the entire room could hear. "Can you imagine being so ugly your parents pay someone to hide you?" More laughter. More whispers. Lyra felt the familiar burn of tears behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not where they could see her break. She'd learned that lesson years ago. Showing pain only made them enjoy it more. The scars that covered the left side of her face were old now, fully healed, but they stood out against her violet skin like silver lightning frozen in time. They ran from her temple down to her jaw, crossing her cheek in jagged lines. More scars covered her arms, visible even under her academy uniform. In Valorian culture, these marks were worse than any crime. They were proof of imperfection, and imperfection was the gravest sin. Nobody asked how she got them. Nobody cared about the story behind them. They only saw the surface, and the surface was all that mattered. "Why doesn't she just wear a mask?" someone whispered nearby. "I heard Valorians consider scarred people cursed. Like actually cursed by their gods." "Well, I mean, can you blame them? It's pretty bad." Lyra's hands shook harder. She needed to leave. Now, before the tears came. Before her voice cracked. Before she gave them any more ammunition. She picked up her tray slowly, carefully, trying not to draw attention. It didn't work. It never worked. "Oh look, it's moving," Vex announced. "Everybody make way for the monster." The walk to the exit felt like miles. Every step was measured, controlled, desperate. She kept her eyes locked on the floor, watching her own feet move across the polished ground. Don't run. Running makes it worse. Just walk. Just breathe. Just get to the door. She was 3 steps from freedom when a younger student came barreling through the entrance, arms loaded with data pads that were clearly about to scatter everywhere. Without thinking, Lyra caught the door with her foot and reached out to steady the kid with her free hand. "Oh, thanks," the student mumbled, rushing past without really looking at her. Lyra slipped into the hallway and the door sealed behind her. The sounds of the cafeteria became muffled, distant. She pressed her back against the cool metal wall and finally let the tears come. They rolled down her cheeks, hot and bitter. Her chest hitched with silent sobs she'd been holding back for the last 20 minutes. This was her life now. This had been her life for 3 years. Wake up. Go to class. Eat alone. Endure the mockery. Hide. Cry. Sleep. Repeat. Her own family had sent her here to this distant school, far from their homeworld, far from anyone who knew them. They'd told her it was for the best. A fresh start. An opportunity. But she knew the truth. They were ashamed of her. They wanted her gone. The worst part was she understood why. She'd broken their most sacred rule. She'd allowed herself to be damaged. In their eyes, that made her worthless. Back in the cafeteria, someone had noticed everything. Tyler Brooks sat alone at his table, his sandwich forgotten in his hand. He was new here, only 2 weeks into his exchange program from Earth. Everything about Zenith Academy still felt surreal. Aliens were real. Faster-than-light travel was real. Different dimensions were real. He was living in what should have been impossible. But what he just watched wasn't complicated or alien. It was the oldest, simplest cruelty in the universe. Someone hurting someone else just because they could. And everyone else just letting it happen. Tyler watched Vex and his friends laugh and high-five each other like they'd accomplished something impressive. He watched dozens of other students go back to their meals like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just watched someone get torn apart for entertainment. And he'd watched the girl with the scars. How she tried to make herself invisible. How she'd shaken. How she'd still helped that younger kid even when she was clearly falling apart. That detail stuck with him. In her worst moment, she'd still thought about someone else. Tyler stood up and dumped his tray in the recycler. His roommate, a kid named Brandon from the Canadian settlement on Mars, called after him. "Yo Tyler, where you going? We've got advanced physics in 15. Library," Tyler said, his voice flat. "What for?" Tyler looked back at the Krillian table one more time. Vex was demonstrating something with his hands, probably reenacting his mockery for anyone who'd missed it. The whole group was laughing. "I need to look something up," Tyler said. "About the Valorians. About their culture." Brandon's eyes widened. "Dude. No. You've been here 2 weeks. Don't get involved." "Someone should," Tyler replied quietly and walked toward the library. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet. But he knew he couldn't just watch this happen again tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that. There had to be something he could do. Something he could say. Some way to make this right. Because if nobody stood up, if everybody just kept walking past and pretending not to see, then what was the point of any of this? What was the point of all these different species coming together if they couldn't even manage basic kindness? Tyler pushed through the library doors, his mind already racing with questions. He needed to understand what he was dealing with. And then he needed to figure out how one human kid from Earth could possibly make a difference in a school full of beings who could bend light, manipulate gravity, and read minds. But he'd figure it out. He had to. The Zenith Academy library was massive, spreading across 3 floors with sections dedicated to every known species in the galaxy. Tyler found himself in the cultural archives, scrolling through holographic displays about Valorian society. What he read made his stomach turn. Physical perfection wasn't just valued in Valorian culture. It was everything. Their entire social structure, their religion, their laws, all of it centered on the idea that outward beauty reflected inner worth. Scars, birthmarks, any kind of physical imperfection was seen as a curse from their gods. A sign of unworthiness. Tyler sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. On Earth, scars told stories. They showed survival. He had a scar on his knee from learning to ride a bike. His dad had one across his shoulder from his time in the service, and he wore it with pride. But here, for Valorians, those same marks meant social death. Over the next few days, Tyler found himself noticing Lyra everywhere. Not because he was looking for her, but because once you started paying attention, you couldn't stop seeing. She was always alone, always in the corners, always trying to take up as little space as possible. But he noticed other things too. Things nobody else seemed to see. In the library, he watched her spend 2 hours helping a struggling Minoan student with their math homework. The little creature couldn't reach the upper shelves, and Lyra quietly gathered every book they needed without being asked. When another student dropped their data pad and files scattered everywhere, Lyra was the first one on her knees helping pick them up. She volunteered at the medical bay during her free periods, the one place most students avoided because it smelled weird and you might see actual injuries. She was kind. Genuinely, consistently kind. And nobody noticed because they couldn't see past her face. Tyler started sitting closer to where Lyra usually positioned herself. Not at her table, that would be too obvious, but near enough to observe. He noticed that she always arrived at the cafeteria exactly 17 minutes after the rush, when most students were already eating and less likely to notice her. She had routes through the hallways that avoided the main corridors. She'd mapped out her entire existence to be invisible. One afternoon, Tyler approached Professor Aldris, their galactic history teacher. The old Tellurian looked like a walking tree, with bark-like skin and leaves that changed color with his mood. He was one of the few teachers who seemed to actually care about his students rather than just the curriculum. "Professor, can I ask you something about Valorian culture?" Tyler asked after class. Aldris's leaves shifted to a curious yellow. "Of course, Tyler. What would you like to know?" "The girl in our class. Lyra. Those scars on her face. How did she get them?" The professor's leaves darkened to a somber brown. "You're one of the first students to ask me that in 3 years. Most prefer not to acknowledge her existence at all." He gestured for Tyler to sit. Lyra's scars came from an act of extraordinary courage. When she was 12 years old, there was a transport accident on her homeworld. A vehicle caught fire with her younger brother trapped inside. She pulled him out through a window through the flames. Saved his life. Tyler felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. "She's a hero." "By human standards, absolutely," Aldris agreed. "By Valorian standards, she's a tragedy. The burns scarred her permanently and in doing so, made her unmarriageable, unemployable, essentially invisible in their society. Her family thanked her privately for saving their son, then sent her here where no one would know them. They visit once a year, always in private, always brief. That's insane, Tyler said. She saved her brother's life. Different cultures value different things, Tyler. It's not our place to judge. But Aldris's leaves had turned a deep, frustrated red that suggested he didn't entirely believe his own words. The breaking point came during social dynamics class. Professor Croth, a Zentari who believed in letting students express their authentic perspectives, allowed students to give presentations on evolutionary advantages. Vex volunteered immediately and Tyler knew it was going to be bad. The Krillian pulled up a holographic display at the front of the room. Today I'm presenting on evolutionary failures and what we can learn from inferior adaptation, Vex announced with a smile that made Tyler's hands clench into fists. The first image that appeared was Lyra's face, magnified to 10 times its normal size, every scar highlighted and labeled. The Valorian seated in the back, Vex continued, not even using her name, represents a clear example of failed genetic development. Note the extensive scarring, the asymmetrical features, the overall lack of adaptive advantage. Lyra sat frozen at her desk, staring straight ahead. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone pale purple. Tyler could see her jaw working, fighting to keep her expression neutral. From an evolutionary standpoint, Vex went on, such specimens would naturally be selected against. Their own species has the correct response, removing them from the breeding population and positions of influence. It's simply nature taking its course. Some students shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded along. Professor Croth watched with an expression that was probably meant to look thoughtfully neutral but just came across as cowardly. Tyler's chair scraped loudly as he stood up. Every head in the classroom turned toward him. Question, Tyler said, his voice level but hard as iron. Vex looked annoyed at the interruption. Yes. You've spent 10 minutes talking about your theories and your family's research and your people's achievements. So here's my question. What have you actually done? Personally. What have you accomplished that wasn't handed to you or done by someone else? The classroom went dead silent. Vex's crystalline face somehow managed to look flustered. My family is one of the most respected. I didn't ask about your family, Tyler cut him off. I asked about you. Because from where I'm sitting, you haven't done anything except tear someone else down to make yourself feel important. And that's not evolution. That's just being a coward. Professor Croth stood up quickly. Tyler, that's quite enough. Vex, please continue your... The bell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Students grabbed their things and rushed out, eager to escape the awkwardness. Tyler saw Lyra slip out a side door, moving fast. Vex and his friends clustered together, shooting Tyler looks that promised retaliation. Brandon caught up with Tyler in the hallway, eyes wide. Dude, are you crazy? You just made an enemy of the most powerful family in the Krillian sector. Good, Tyler said simply. Maybe they'll focus on me instead of her. That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lyra's face during that presentation. The way she'd forced herself to sit there and take it. The way everyone had just let it happen. He thought about his grandmother back on Earth, who had burned scars on her arms from pulling his uncle out of a house fire when she was young. She'd shown him those scars once and told him, "These marks mean when it mattered most, I chose love over safety. Never be ashamed of choosing love." Tyler pulled up his data pad and started researching. If words weren't enough, if standing up in class wasn't enough, then he needed to do something bigger. Something that would make everyone stop and actually see what they'd been ignoring. He just had to figure out what that something was. And he had to do it before Vex and his friends found another way to break Lyra down even further. Because Tyler was starting to realize something important. This wasn't just about defending someone from bullies. This was about challenging an entire system that measured worth by the wrong standards. And somebody needed to start asking why everyone just accepted that system without question. Why not him? The next day started like any other, but there was tension in the air that Tyler could feel the moment he walked into the academy. Students whispered in clusters, their eyes flicking toward him and then away. Word had spread about what happened in social dynamics class. In a school where most students avoided conflict at all costs, what Tyler had done was basically declaring war. Brandon pulled him aside before first period. Vex and his crew are planning something. I heard them talking near the docking bay this morning. Just keep your head down today, okay? Tyler nodded, but he wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about Lyra. Bullies like Vex didn't take humiliation well, and when they couldn't get to the person who embarrassed them, they went after easier targets. Lunch period arrived and Tyler headed to the cafeteria with a knot in his stomach. He scanned the room and spotted Lyra in her usual corner, hood up, trying to be invisible. Vex and his friends were at their table, but they kept looking toward the courtyard outside. They were waiting for something. Tyler was halfway through his meal when he heard the commotion. Students were getting up from their tables, moving toward the large windows that overlooked the central courtyard. He heard laughter, the cruel kind that made his skin crawl. He was on his feet immediately, pushing through the crowd. The courtyard was packed. Students formed a circle, and in the center stood Vex holding some kind of small device. Lyra was there too, backed against the fountain, looking like a cornered animal. Her hood had been pulled down, exposing her scarred face to everyone. Tyler could see her trembling from across the courtyard. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vex announced, his voice amplified somehow to reach everyone. "I've been told I'm too harsh in my assessments. That I don't offer solutions, only criticism. So today I'm going to show you all something revolutionary." He held up the device, which looked like a small silver disc with glowing blue edges. "This is a Krillian holographic corrector. It scans any biological form and projects what that being would look like with optimal genetic expression. Basically, it shows perfection." Tyler started pushing through the crowd, but there were too many bodies in the way. He was too far back. Vex pointed the device at Lyra. A beam of blue light scanned her from head to toe, and then, above her head, a hologram materialized. It was Lyra's face but different. The scars were gone. Her features were symmetrical, unmarked, flawless. The crowd gasped, some in amazement, others in cruel delight. "This," Vex said, gesturing to the hologram, "is what she could have been. What she should have been. But instead." He gestured to the real Lyra standing below her own perfect image. "This is what we're stuck with. A mistake. An error in the genetic code. A waste of potential." The courtyard erupted in murmurs. Some students looked uncomfortable, but too many were nodding along, fascinated by the hologram. Lyra stood frozen beneath her own digitally perfected face, tears streaming down her scarred cheek. She looked like she wanted to run, but the crowd had closed in around her. There was nowhere to go. Tyler finally broke through the inner ring of students. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked forward with absolute purpose, his eyes locked on Lyra, ignoring Vex completely. "Oh look," Vex said with a mocking smile. "The primitive human comes to play hero again. How predictable. Tell me, do all humans have this savior complex, or is it just you?" Tyler didn't even glance at him. He walked straight to Lyra, whose eyes were wide with confusion and fear. The hologram of her perfect face still hovered above them, a cruel reminder of what she supposedly should have been. Without saying a word, Tyler reached up and switched off the device. The hologram flickered and died. The courtyard went quiet, everyone watching to see what would happen next. Tyler gently took Lyra's face in his hands. She flinched at first, not used to anyone touching her, especially not her scars. But Tyler's touch was soft, careful, and his eyes met hers with something she hadn't seen directed at her in years. Respect. Then he leaned forward and kissed her scarred cheek. Softly. Deliberately. The courtyard gasped collectively. He kissed her other cheek, where another scar ran. Then her forehead, where the worst of the scarring created a jagged line across her skin. Each kiss was gentle, genuine, filled with a tenderness that made the moment feel sacred rather than romantic. The silence in the courtyard was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Tyler stepped back but kept one hand on Lyra's shoulder, then turned to face the crowd. His voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the courtyard. "These scars," he said, looking at each face in the crowd, "are proof that when it mattered, she acted. While her brother was burning alive in that transport, she didn't think about her appearance. She didn't think about her social status or her future or what people would think. She thought about saving someone she loved, and she did it. That's more than most beings in this galaxy will ever do in their entire lives." He turned to look directly at Vex. "You want to talk about evolutionary advantage? Let me tell you about humans. We're not the strongest species. We can't refract light or read minds or manipulate gravity. But you know what we can do. We endure. We survive. And we remember who stood with us when things got hard." Tyler looked back at the crowd. "On Earth we have a saying. Scars show where you've been, not where you're going. Every scar tells a story. Every mark is proof of survival. Her scars are beautiful because they're evidence of love. They're proof that she valued someone else's life more than her own comfort. That's not a flaw. That's not a mistake. That's what real courage looks like." He pointed to the device Vex was still holding. That machine showed you a version of her that never had to make a hard choice. A version that never had to sacrifice anything. A version that never proved what it was made of. Why would anyone want to be that? Why would anyone think that's better? Lyra was crying harder now, but these tears were different. Her hand came up to touch her own cheek where Tyler had kissed it, like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Vex's crystalline face had gone dark, his light refracting in angry red patterns. You don't understand our culture, human. You don't understand what? I understand that your culture teaches you to value the wrong things, Tyler interrupted. And I understand that fear makes people cruel. You're afraid that if scars and imperfections are okay, then maybe your perfection doesn't make you special. Maybe it just makes you normal. A few students in the crowd nodded. A Draken warrior caste student, built like a tank with scales that could deflect plasma, stepped forward. The human speaks truth. In my culture, scars are marks of honor. Warriors display them with pride. A Minoan student raised their small hand. She helped me with my homework last week. Spent 2 hours teaching me when she could have been doing anything else. More voices joined in. Not everyone but enough. The tide was shifting and Vex could feel it. His friends looked uncertain now, glancing at each other, no longer sure they were on the winning side. Tyler turned back to Lyra and spoke quietly just for her. You okay? She nodded, unable to speak, but her eyes said everything. For the first time in 3 years at this academy, someone had seen her. Really seen her. Not the scars, not the imperfection, but the person underneath. The hero who'd walked through fire for someone she loved. The crowd began to disperse, students breaking off into smaller groups, arguing, discussing, questioning. Some still sided with Vex, but many were looking at Lyra differently now. Seeing her for the first time. Tyler stayed by her side as the courtyard slowly emptied, his presence a silent promise that she wasn't alone anymore. And Lyra, for the first time since the fire that changed her life, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Retried. Within an hour, the entire academy had seen the video. Someone in the crowd had recorded everything, from the moment Vex activated the holographic device to Tyler's speech to those 3 gentle kisses on Lyra's scarred face. The footage spread through the school network like wildfire, jumping from data pad to data pad, shared in group chats and posted on student forums. The reactions were explosive and divided. In the human dormitory, Tyler's fellow exchange students treated him like a celebrity. They clapped him on the back, called him brave, said he'd represented Earth well. But walk down any other corridor and the response was completely different. Valorian students stared at him with open hostility. The Krillians whispered threats. Some species found the whole thing romantic. Others thought it was disgusting. A few called it cultural imperialism, a human forcing his values on others. Tyler sat in his room that evening, scrolling through the comments on his data pad. Brandon sat on the opposite bunk, shaking his head. Dude, you've got species I've never even heard of arguing about this. There's a whole thread debating whether kissing scars is beautiful or offensive. The Zentari Philosophy Club is using you as a case study. You're famous. I don't want to be famous, Tyler muttered. I just wanted people to leave her alone. Yeah, well, mission accomplished. Now everyone's talking about her. Not sure that's better. Tyler hadn't thought about that. He'd been so focused on defending Lyra that he hadn't considered she might not want to be the center of attention, even positive attention. His stomach twisted with doubt. Had he made things worse? A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Brandon opened it to find Lyra standing in the hallway, hood up as always, hands fidgeting nervously. Is Tyler here? She asked quietly. Brandon stepped aside, gesturing her in. She entered carefully like she wasn't sure she was allowed. Tyler stood up immediately. Hey, I'm sorry if I made things worse for you. I wasn't thinking about. Why did you do it? Lyra interrupted. Her voice was soft but desperate, like she'd been holding that question in all day and couldn't contain it anymore. Tyler blinked. Do what? Stand up to Vex. No. The other part. She touched her cheek, the same spot he'd kissed. Nobody touches me. Nobody. Even my own family stopped after the accident. They'd hug my brother right in front of me, but with me they'd just nod. Like I was contagious. So why did you do that? What do you want from me? The question hit Tyler like a punch. She thought he wanted something. Of course she did. In her experience, nobody did anything kind without expecting something in return. I don't want anything, Tyler said honestly. I did it because what Vex was doing was wrong. And because everything I said was true. Your scars are proof of something incredible. But you barely know me. I know enough. I've been watching you for days. I've seen how you help people. How you volunteer at the medical bay. How you held the door for that kid even when you were crying. You're kind, Lyra. Actually kind. That's rare anywhere in the galaxy. Lyra stood very still, processing his words. Brandon quietly excused himself, muttering something about checking on their laundry, giving them space. On my planet, Lyra said slowly, kindness doesn't matter if you're ugly. Nothing matters except appearance. I've known that my whole life. And then you show up, and in one day you act like everything I was taught is wrong. Because it is wrong, Tyler said firmly. Look, let me show you something. He pulled up his data pad and started scrolling through images. Pictures from Earth. A Maori warrior with traditional facial tattoos. An African woman with intricate scarification patterns on her arms. A burn survivor modeling swimwear, her scars visible and uncovered. A military veteran showing his prosthetic leg at a marathon. On Earth, Tyler explained, different cultures view scars and marks differently. Some see them as beauty. Some as honor. Some as survival. But almost all of them see scars as stories worth telling. This woman here, he pointed to the burn survivor, she was in a house fire. Lost most of her family. These scars remind her every day that she survived. That she's stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to her. Lyra stared at the images, her eyes wide. But she's showing them. In public. For everyone to see. Because she's not ashamed. Why should she be? She didn't choose the fire. She just chose to live through it. Same as you. I saved my brother, Lyra whispered like she was testing out the words. That's what you said. That I saved him. You did. You walked through fire for someone you loved. That makes you a hero. My family never called me that. Then your family is wrong. Lyra sat down on Brandon's bunk, her legs seeming to give out. I don't know how to believe that. I've spent 3 years thinking I'm worthless. That I'm broken. That my life is basically over because of how I look. And you're telling me that's all wrong, but I don't know how to just stop believing it. Tyler sat across from her. I'm not asking you to change overnight. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe, possibly, the people who made you feel worthless were the ones who had it backward. They talked for hours. Tyler told her about Earth, about human history, about how humans viewed survival and sacrifice. Lyra told him about Valoria, about the brother she saved who was now thriving at a top university, about how her parents visited once a year and always kept the meetings private and brief. She told him about the loneliness, the daily cruelty, the way she'd mapped out her entire existence to avoid being seen. You held that door for someone even when you were falling apart, Tyler said. That says more about who you are than any scar ever could. For the first time in 3 years, Lyra pulled her hood back completely. She met Tyler's eyes without hiding. Thank you, she said simply. For seeing me. Meanwhile, in another part of the academy, Vex was having a very different conversation. He sat in Headmaster Torin's office, his crystalline body refracting light in agitated patterns. His father, a high-ranking Krillian diplomat, appeared via hologram, his expression cold. You were humiliated by a human, his father said flatly. A species barely beyond planetary space travel. This is unacceptable. The human violated cultural boundaries, Vex argued. He touched a Valorian's scars without permission. He made a spectacle of their cultural shame. I'm filing a formal complaint for cultural insensitivity and inappropriate conduct. Headmaster Torin, a Zentari known for his diplomatic skills, folded his 6-fingered hands carefully. An interesting argument. However, I'll need to speak with the Valorian student herself. If she felt violated, that's one matter. If she welcomed the support, that's quite another. Vex's confidence faltered. Of course she felt violated. She's Valorian. They don't. We'll let her speak for herself, Torin interrupted gently. Tomorrow morning. Both you and Tyler will present your perspectives. Lyra will share hers. And then we'll decide if any rules were actually broken. That night, Tyler received a message on his data pad. It was from Lyra, just 3 words, "Thank you, friend." Tyler smiled and typed back, "Anytime." He had no idea what tomorrow would bring. No idea if Headmaster Torin would punish him or praise him. But for the first time since arriving at Zenith Academy, he felt like he'd done something that actually mattered. And in her room across campus, Lyra stood in front of her mirror and looked at her reflection without flinching. The scars were still there. They'd always be there. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't define her. Maybe they were just part of her story. A story that was far from over. Retried. The morning of the hearing arrived with dark clouds gathering over Zenith Academy's 3 moons. Tyler barely slept. He kept running through possible scenarios in his head, trying to figure out what he'd say to Headmaster Torin. Brandon had stayed up with him until nearly dawn, helping him prepare. "Just tell the truth," Brandon had said. "That's all you can do." The hearing was scheduled for third period in the headmaster's conference room. Tyler arrived early and found Vex already there, sitting with perfect posture, his crystalline body reflecting the morning light in cold, sharp angles. His father's hologram flickered beside him, a silent presence of authority and pressure. Headmaster Torin entered through the side door, his Zentari robes flowing behind him. He was tall, almost 7 feet, with wise eyes that seemed to see right through people. Professor Aldris followed him, there to serve as a neutral observer. "We're waiting for one more," Torin said, settling into his chair at the head of the long table. The door opened again and Lyra walked in. Tyler's breath caught. She wasn't wearing her hood. Her hair was pulled back, fully exposing the scars on her face. She walked with her shoulders straight, her chin up. She looked terrified, but she was doing it anyway. She took the empty seat next to Tyler. Their eyes met briefly and she gave him the smallest nod. "Thank you all for coming," Torin began. "We're here to address a complaint filed by Vex regarding the incident in the courtyard yesterday. Vex, you claim that Tyler violated cultural boundaries and committed inappropriate conduct. Please present your case." Vex stood, his voice smooth and practiced. "Headmaster, what Tyler did was a clear violation of Valorian cultural dignity. He touched Lyra's scars without her permission, making a public spectacle of what is considered deeply shameful in her culture. He imposed human values on a situation he doesn't understand, showing complete disrespect for the cultural diversity this academy claims to celebrate." Vex's father's hologram nodded approvingly. The argument was clever, Tyler had to admit. It turned the situation around, making Tyler look like the aggressor. "Furthermore," Vex continued, "his actions have created division among the student body. Students are fighting over this incident. Cultural groups are at odds. He's disrupted the harmony of this institution with his primitive human notions of heroism." Torin listened carefully, his expression unreadable. "I see. Tyler, would you like to respond?" Tyler stood, his heart hammering. "Headmaster, I'm not going to pretend I know everything about Valorian culture. I've been here 2 weeks. But I know cruelty when I see it. What Vex did in that courtyard wasn't about culture. It was about humiliation. He used technology to show Lyra what she should have looked like, then mocked her for not meeting that standard. That's not cultural expression. That's bullying." "But you touched her scars," Vex interrupted. "Without permission." Tyler looked at Lyra. "That's not for me to answer. That's for her to answer." All eyes turned to Lyra. She stood slowly, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "Headmaster Torin, may I speak?" "Please," Torin said gently. "This hearing is as much about you as anyone else." Lyra took a deep breath. "Vex is right about one thing. In Valorian culture, my scars are shameful. I've been taught my entire life that I'm worthless because of them. My own parents can barely look at me. They sent me here so they wouldn't have to see me every day, so their friends wouldn't know they had a damaged daughter." Her voice cracked slightly but she pushed through. "For 3 years at this academy I've been invisible. Students mock me daily. Teachers ignore it. I eat alone. I sleep alone. I exist in the margins of this school because that's where everyone put me. And I accepted it because I thought that's what I deserved." She turned to face Vex directly. "What you did yesterday in the courtyard wasn't cultural education. You've been tormenting me since I arrived here. Yesterday was just another day for you, another chance to remind me and everyone else that I'm a mistake." Then she turned to Tyler. "And then this human, who's been here 2 weeks and has no reason to care about me at all, stood up and said I was wrong. He said my scars were proof of courage. He treated them like they were something worthy of respect, not shame. Did he ask permission to touch my face? No. But do you want to know something? That was the first time in 3 years that anyone touched me with kindness. The first time anyone looked at my scars and saw something other than disgust." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't stop. "So yes, he violated Valorian cultural expectations. Thank goodness he did. Because Valorian culture taught me to hate myself for saving my brother's life. It taught me that love and sacrifice are worthless if they leave marks. And I'm done believing that." The room was completely silent. Even Vex's father's hologram seemed stunned. Lyra turned to Headmaster Torin. "Tyler didn't hurt me. He helped me see myself clearly for the first time in years. If that's against the rules, then your rules are wrong." She sat down, trembling but defiant. Tyler wanted to reach over and squeeze her hand but wasn't sure if that would help or hurt her case. Torin leaned back in his chair, thinking. Finally he spoke. This academy was founded on the principle that different cultures could coexist and learn from each other. But coexistence doesn't mean accepting cruelty just because it's wrapped in cultural tradition. Vex, your complaint is dismissed. What Tyler did was not a violation. It was an act of compassion. Vex's crystalline face darkened. This is outrageous. My father will. Your father, Torin interrupted, looking directly at the hologram, is welcome to file an appeal with the Galactic Education Board. But I suspect they'll agree with my assessment. Tyler showed moral courage. That's something we should celebrate, not punish. Vex and his father's hologram disappeared without another word, the door slamming behind them. Torin turned to Tyler and Lyra. However, this incident has revealed something important. This academy needs to have a deeper conversation about culture, about respect, about what we truly value. So here's what's going to happen. Next week, we're hosting a mandatory cultural exchange assembly. Students will present their species' perspectives on honor, beauty, courage, and worth. Tyler, Lyra, I'd like you both to present together. If you're willing. Tyler looked at Lyra. She nodded slowly. We'll do it. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Tyler and Lyra worked together every evening, building their presentation. She told him more about Valoria, about her brother who was now studying engineering at a top university. Tyler showed her more images from Earth, stories of human resilience and survival. Other students began approaching Lyra in the halls. Not all of them, but some. A Draken warrior asked to hear the full story of how she saved her brother. A Minoan student invited her to sit at their table. The shift was small but noticeable. Assembly day arrived. The auditorium was packed, every species represented. Vex and his Krillian friends sat in the back, arms crossed, radiating hostility. But Tyler also saw friendly faces. Brandon and the other humans. Professor Aldris with his leaves a supportive green. Even some Valorian students who looked curious rather than disgusted. Vex presented first, showing holographic displays of Krillian achievements. Their art, their architecture, their scientific advances. It was impressive but cold, focusing entirely on external accomplishments and physical perfection. Then Tyler and Lyra took the stage. We want to talk about scars, Tyler began. The auditorium rustled with whispers. He pulled up images on the holographic display. On Earth, scars tell stories. These are Maori warriors with traditional tattoos that mark their family history and personal achievements. This is an Ethiopian woman with scarification patterns that show her tribe and her journey to adulthood. This is a firefighter who has burns from saving children from a burning building. This is a cancer survivor whose scars prove she beat the disease. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. When I was 12, my brother was trapped in a burning transport. I could hear him screaming. I didn't think about my face or my future or what people would think. I thought about him. I pulled him through a broken window, through flames, and got him to safety. She touched the scars on her cheek. These marks bought my brother's life. He's alive today, studying at university, building a future because of what these scars represent. They represent a choice. A choice to love someone more than I loved my own comfort. Tyler pulled up one final image. A simple photograph of a young Valorian boy holding a sign. The words were in Valorian script, but Tyler translated, "My sister is my hero." Lyra's voice broke. My brother sent me that yesterday. It's the first time anyone in my family has said that to me since the accident. He told me he's been ashamed. Not of me but of himself. For letting me believe I was worthless when I was the reason he's alive. Tyler stepped beside her. Every species here has different ideas about beauty and worth. But there's one thing humans believe deeply. Your scars show where you've been, not where you're going. They're proof of survival. Proof of love. Proof that you chose something bigger than yourself. And that's beautiful in any language. The auditorium was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. The Draken warrior student. Then another. Then more. Not everyone joined, but enough did. The applause built, echoing through the space. After the assembly, students lined up to talk to Lyra. Not to mock her, but to hear her story. To understand. Some still disagreed, still held to their cultural beliefs about perfection. But the conversation had shifted. Questions were being asked that had never been asked before. That evening, Tyler found Lyra sitting by the observation window overlooking the 3 moons. She was crying but smiling too. You okay? He asked, sitting beside her. I talked to my brother today. Really talked. He apologized for not speaking up sooner. My parents too. They're coming to visit next month. Actually visit, not just a quick private meeting. She wiped her eyes. I don't know if they'll ever fully understand, but it's a start. It's more than a start, Tyler said. You stood up in front of the whole school and told your truth. That took more courage than most people have. Lyra looked at him. You gave me that courage. You showed me it was possible. No, Tyler shook his head. You always had it. I just reminded you. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the moons drift across the alien sky. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Cultural change never was. Some students would always judge by appearance. Some would always value perfection over character. But something fundamental had shifted at Zenith Academy. One human and one scarred Valorian girl had asked a simple question. What if we're measuring worth by the wrong standards? And that question, once asked, couldn't be unasked. It would ripple outward, changing conversations, challenging assumptions, making people think twice before judging someone by their surface. Lyra pulled out her data pad and showed Tyler a message. It was from another Valorian student, someone who'd never spoken to her before. Thank you for being brave. I have scars too. I've been hiding them. Maybe I don't have to anymore. Tyler smiled. See? You're already changing things. Lyra looked at her reflection in the window, at the scars that had defined her for so long. They were still there. They'd always be there. But now when she looked at them, she didn't see shame. She saw her brother's face. She saw the choice she'd made. She saw proof that when it mattered most, she'd chosen love over everything else. And that, she was finally beginning to understand, was something worth carrying.